All right, welcome everybody to the Retire Y'all Charleston podcast. I got a special guest with us, a familiar voice, but today's topic is going to be a little bit different than what we've done in the past. It's almost like a debate, and I got to be honest, I'm feeling awfully intimidated right now. I'm in a Zoom room right now with Mr. David Brooks, who financial advisors across the whole country pay big bucks to train with this man to talk about taxes. Couple that with his audio video guy, and then there's like Vibe and Firefly in the room too. I feel like I'm being like I feel like you might have the IRS in here or something too, but
we're trying to keep them out of everything. Trust me.
Oh, that's right. So that's what the other people are in here for. They're acting as blocking and tackling of the IRS. But we did a podcast together a couple months ago or so where we talk about your origin story and we talk about your practice as a whole. With a high, it centers around taxes. And, you know, I went into that podcast. I didn't listen to it, but one of the things I've always wrestled with is the idea of what I'll call heavy-handed Roth conversions. I've long held the belief that, you know, no two clients are alike. We're probably going to have to figure out some sort of consensus avatar client as we go through this conversation because, you know, you've got individuals across the spectrum where Roth conversions make all the sense in the world. But what I'm landing on from an avatar client perspective, and I posted this in our little financial advisor chat room, I said, hey, I'm of the thought that Roth conversions should only occur in the 12% marginal bracket. Who thinks otherwise? And I got to tell you, I got dogpiled on. Most advisors were like, dude, I convert all the way through 24. And truthfully, I'm just carrying on right now. I said, look, it's common for advisors to march out the Roth conversion strategy because it's kind of sexy. It plays well with marketing. Individuals they have a tendency to want to activity. They want to convert because it seems shrewd. It seems like a good move. And when I sit down behind any sort of tax analysis software and I start gaming out the mathematics surrounding a conversion, and this is my opening statement, and I'll give the floor to you in just a moment. Most of our avatar clients, and these are millionaires, these aren't like, you know, people with paltry amounts of assets, individuals with annual household incomes of $80,000 to upwards to $140,000 a year with $1 million of savings. Most of these individuals' effective tax rates, because you look at the standardized deduction being the size it is right now, because you look at how Social Security gets taxed at a lower rate, you know, obviously there's a progressive calculation there that 85% of it will get run through the grid, but it still gets taxed at a lower rate than like an IRA distribution, of course. Most of our clients' effective tax rate is in the single digits up into the teens. So converting with a heavy hand, you're now, because most of these individuals oftentimes are in that 22% bracket, every single one of those converted Roth dollars is getting taxed at 22%. So what I've always wrestled with is, why on earth would you want to convert a traditional dollar into a Roth and pay 22% when this individual's current effective tax rate is 10 or 12? The only logical assumption in my head is you go down the path of, well, 34 trillion in debt, growing by $1 trillion every 100 days. Look at the marginal brackets in the 50s and the 60s. Taxes are going to skyrocket, which we can get into. I don't think taxes are going to double for a middle-class millionaire, someone with W-2 income of, or excuse me, 1099 W-2, excuse me, of $100,000 to $120,000 a year. But I know you have a different perspective and a different approach, and I also know how calculated you are. Your recommendation to do these heavy-handed conversions, it's not shtick, it's not a marketing gimmick. You have thought through this on many different fronts. So today we're going to debate a little bit. about
Absolutely. So let's talk about that, right? And I appreciate your opening statement. So let me give you a couple counters to that. So not everybody should be doing a Roth conversion. In our humble opinion, we found only 96% of our clients need to be doing the Roth conversion. So yes, Adam, there's 4% that it doesn't make sense to do the conversion currently, but will make the sense most likely to do the conversion when they stop earning income. And that is, for instance, I have a surgeon. He's earning about $1.2 million a year. His retirement income is going to be about $300,000 to $350,000 a year. That's his ask. So in that regard, and he's retiring in 2 years. So in that regard, I can convert for him at a 28 to 33% effective rate versus he is at 37% federally today and will be at 40 in 2 years on his income. So there's a delta that I can probably get the math done and get the $2 million that this individual has moved over in about 10 years. But so to answer your question, to Roth or to not Roth, right? That's the question we're answering here. There's a lot more than their effective tax rate. And now, you've sent one of your advisors to see me speak, I believe, somewhere. I don't remember which one. That was probably out in Kansas, I think, at one of the advisor trainings I've done for an organization we partner with. I think one of your advisors has been to that. But you've never come through my deep mastermind, which is where we kind of start to really break this down. And it's not just one tax that we're dealing with. And so that's the mistake I think we make. So first of all, yes, I don't use fear tactics. I'm not going $34.7 trillion of debt today, another trillion every 90 days. Just so you know, we're at $1.2 trillion for interest-only payments today. That is a major concern for me and for my clients and our federal budget. So just so you know, we collected $4.4 trillion last year in revenue. So that's 25% of the revenue of the federal government and climbing is just to pay interest. No principal payments, just interest. So how do we get that genie back in the bottle? Well, if we don't study history, we are doomed to repeat it. And the great Mark Twain kind of paraphrasing his thing, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes, right? So if we don't want to go back to the charts of the 1940s when we went to 94% taxes, or even all the way through until Reagan came in where the tax rate stayed above 70% on the top, the marginal bracket in the middle there was in the high 20s for most people. Now, Adam, I'm a little bit older than you. You got some gray hair there, so I appreciate you sharing that with the crowd. But listen, just in the year 2000, the average middle income family in America, that middle 20% quintile of income earners in America, which is most of the dual income families you and I are probably having walk in our respective doors, their taxes were 43% higher in the year 2000 than they are today. That's just 24 years ago. So this isn't like a long time ago. And the year 2000 was the last time, just so you know, we actually had a surplus in our federal government. We actually had a balanced budget. We still had a deficit, but we actually had a surplus. And then Bush Jr. basically took us into the wars, and that was the end of that nonsense. But anyway, so you've got to start to think and plan out about why a Roth is so powerful and so significant. Now, you're talking about heavy-handed conversions. Just so you know, we have a conversion this week, $4.4 million IRA. We're converting 100% of it in one swoop, and it makes sense for the client. Now, we can get behind the math on how that makes sense because there's not just the tax that they would pay federally. Depending on the state someone lives in, you and I both live in states that actually have a little bit heavy income tax, right? So I believe South Carolina is what, about 7 or 8%? Is that your income tax rate there?
Progressive tops at 7, yeah.
Okay, so we were there. We were 684 last year. Nebraska actually just passed a law. We're at 584 cap this year, and we'll be at 399 in 2027. So we'll be at about a 4%. So we are reducing ours slightly. But we're going to leave state taxes out of the argument because depending on who is watching or listening to this, they may be in different states. And we still have a handful of states that you can live in that you don't have to pay any state income tax. Or there are certain states like Iowa, which we have a lot of Iowa clients because it's just across the river here. Iowa does not tax retirement distributions on the state level. So Social Security doesn't have to pay tax, pensions don't have to pay income tax or IRA distributions, et cetera. So let's kind of take this off to the side here and let's understand that eventually if you have an IRA, Adam, and again, we'll have to come up with some consensus here. So the average balance in 401k/IRAs that walks in our door is about $850,000. And then they have some other accounts, about $1 million on average.
Fair, that's a good avatar client right there. You know, you talk about a surgeon making 1.1 or a $4 million conversion.
Right. So we'll leave those out. Let's just talk what I call a bread and butter retiree. He's done everything right, at least according to what they were told to do. Went to work, paid off their mortgage. They've done everything right, and our tax code unfortunately penalizes them. Even if they're philanthropic or they tie to their local church or synagogue or mosque or whatever, they're actually giving money to charity because standard deduction is so high. They're really not getting to take advantage of those tax deductions, at least if they're not doing any proactive planning. There's ways we can bring back that into the fold. So the biggest thing that I would say is the Roth conversion by itself will save the majority of clients a significant portion of money. And I'll be happy to illustrate this out. But what we do and what maybe we can help you do for your clients is take it a step further and pair in other tax strategies to help reduce that effective rate on that conversion. So, but even if we don't, we can do some basic and simple math. So, let's just assume that we have a client. Now, again, and you and I have discussed this off air before, et cetera. Your average retirees, exactly. I think you said it earlier in this recording, somewhere going to retire on somewhere around 85 to 140,000 or something like that. So about 100, 120 grand is kind of what the normal ask you're seeing, somewhere 8 to 10 grand a month in income.
With about 40,000 coming from Social Security, household Social Security income.
So that's a little lower than the Social Securities we see, but we'll take that. So let me give you an example. Now, I did work up some math here. All right. So I've got, let's call it Bob. All right. And let's say Bob is getting Social Security. Now, Bob actually is getting Social Security at $38,000 a year. And Bob has been retired for a while. Okay. His wife, Mary, he's married. And again, we can discuss single or married. We're happy to do all that. And we're going to assume Mary didn't work outside the home. So she's simply collecting the spousal benefit. They've been married a long time. So she's collecting half of his Social Security, or $19,000. Now, Bob actually was a school teacher. We work with a lot of folks that are public servants, firefighters, police, school teachers in our marketplace. So Bob actually got a pension, something we don't see that much anymore. And I don't know about your marketplace, but we have about 20% of our clients still have pensions. Typically, it's governmental employees. So Bob took a reduced pension, had a 100% survivor benefit in this example. So he wanted to make sure Mary would be taken care of. So the pension sticks around even if Bob doesn't. He's getting $4,000 a month or $48,000 a year. He was a school teacher right here locally. Okay, and now the names have been changed and the numbers are rounded off here, but this is very typical of what we see. This is more income than Bob and Mary ever spent in their life, and more income than they actually ask us for. And this is very common for our clients too. And you can speak to yours. Our clients do. They save up $1 million. They end up with some guaranteed income. Now, ours between Social Security and pensions average closer to 50 to 60 that they'll have kind of coming in, what I call forced income. But I can run numbers of 40 or whatever the numbers you want and send you some data on some of the analytics. And I have software that I've developed over the last 15 years that helps you really quantify this, and we can get you access to that. But when this happens, right, they're typically telling us, hey, I don't want to touch that income until I have to because I don't want to pay what? I don't want to pay taxes, right? So if they've got $850,000 in that IRA, right, what's going to happen to that IRA? It's going to what? It's going to grow. Now, I can make these any age you want. So let's just assume today's the day. Bob hits RMD age this year, right? He's got to take his first required minimum distribution. So now he's got to add an RMD onto that income. Well, how old do you want to make Bob? If he was 75, I'm just picking a number here, just because I know the math. If Bob was 75 and he had 850 grand in his IRA, his RMD is just under 35 grand. It's $34,550. So he's got to take that. So if we add all that up, that should be about, 139 grand in income roughly. So what tax bracket are they in today? 22, right? We can agree on that.
Here's where I wrestle with this, right? So let me interject here, right? Without the RMD, this person has an effective tax of 5%. 5%, right? Because that Social Security is not getting slaughtered with taxes. So
it is because the pension, absolutely it is.
With the RMD, that effective tax rate's only 8.5%. So even with an income of $140,000, that person is not getting hosed per se on taxes. Now, what you said is not just about effective tax; it's about all these other things. IRMA, my guess is you're going to get into, and so, anyways, herein lie 6 other taxes. So I'm excited to hear these. But
right?
as
so
that
exactly
stands,
right.
That example, state taxes aside, that person only has an effective tax of 8.5%. Right there. So those numbers on that tax rate is only 8.5% effective tax.
Their actually tax is a little lower than that. Their tax bill, just so you know, in that exact situation, is $11,820. So on 140 grand in income,
because I got my little software like 11,000. I got 11,900. Yep. So
we're pretty close, right? So that's their tax liability. However, Adam, in less than 2 years, that tax liability changes. That tax liability, because what's known as the Trump tax cut, the Tax and Job Act 17, is set to expire. Now, we can also do some math and play around like, oh, Republicans get elected and they extend it. I'll be happy to play that game too. But if it does expire, that tax bill changes to $14,900 on the same income.
And just to be clear on that, so that's, and I'm looking at the very same piece of mathematics there. That's contingent, and I understand this is probably the direction it's headed.
It's the law. So, and again, all my numbers are based off the law today. The law says that's the tax rate in 2020.
And I have 15,000. We're really, really close, though. So if all things remain constant, Trump's tax reform sunsets, this very same scenario that I said was 8.5 with the RMD bumps up to 10.7 effectively.
Yep. Okay, so now let's talk about if your client doesn't spend the money, the account value we assume will continue to grow, and we know that can be dangerous. Now, for our assumptions, we typically grow the assets for assumption value at 6% a year, something we consider to be reasonable. And we can have an argument there. We can take that number down higher, rerun numbers.
I think it's fair. 6 is good.
All right. So if I just let this thing keep cooking and let these assets grow, eventually these clients are going to start paying additional taxes. And that's via IRMA, right? So IRMA, you have Medicare Part B where you pay a penalty and Medicare Part D where you pay a penalty. So that's 2 taxes. Bob's got to pay them. And oh, by the way, now Mary has to pay them. So that's 4 additional taxes once they break that threshold. And you have to inflation adjust their income needs going forward. So they're going to want to take bigger distributions going out, we would assume. And again, there's a lot of assumptions in here. We can play that game all day long. But they're going to hit IRMA penalties, and they are going to pay over $100,000 in IRMA taxes alone, Adam, in their lifetime, assuming one of them makes age 90. All right?
That's the assumption. You snuck something in there. I know what you did there, David. You snuck in their lifetime. So let's unpack IRMA, right? So IRMA is you're going to get a bump up on your Medicare Part B premium. Right now, base Medicare Part B premium is $174. If your income on a joint tax return is above $206,000, singularly it's 103 to 258, you have to pay a kicker of $70 extra per month, and you got all the way to $322,000, where that IRMA penalty goes up to $174 a month. And then Part D premiums, just like you said, 12.9, 13.33. I mean, what would happen though? I mean, to be fair, if you did a heavy-handed conversion for this person, you just said he's of RMD age. That means he's in Medicare Part. He's collecting Medicare as well.
And we calculate that in our savings, by the way.
They would get slaughtered with the Medicare.
For how many years?
2 years.
So depending on how I do the conversions, just so you know, in this, it's a 4-year conversion plan.
Okay.
All right, so we can go through that. So for 4 years, I'd make them pay some penalties. And I would keep them, by the way, in the 24% tax bracket, soon to be 28. So we would do heavy-handed conversions in this example, Adam, for 2 years. All right. At 24%. Fill the bucket. Okay. And we can stop at going right over that fourth conversion. So I could, with doing that, just so you know, I could move over $250,000 of his IRA to his Roth IRA and take the effective or the marginal rate to 24. His effective rate, though, just so you know, would be about 17.5%. Okay. So I am pushing that number up.
Okay. So it just dawned on me too, David. This might be the most boring podcast I've ever produced for the layman's ear. But financial advisors might enjoy it. But layman's is like, what is going on?
Hey, listen, I promise you, if you are the layman listening to this, you're going to want to stick around to hear some of these numbers I'm going to start spewing out. Because this is where it's going to blow people away. All right?
So stay with me. So what you just said was a $250,000 conversion for this person.
Yep.
All right. So with Trump's tax reform, this guy's paying 8.5%. Without Trump's tax reform, he's paying 10.7% effectively. Let's add a $250,000 conversion to this. That's an effective conversion rate of about, I'm seeing 33%. So
we got to get you upgraded tax software. There's no way. All right. So
I'm 333. Oh, hold on one second. Let me fix it. So
should be around 18% or so.
Yeah, I had a conversion of 330,000. So 400 minus. Well, we have to model in the RMD, so it's 250.
Yeah, I can get 250 with the RMD and keep them at 24%.
Okay,
this year.
A conversion
standard deduction
added. All right, stay with me. I know how to do this. So we're at 310. Save. All right.
So up to about 168,000 or so is 22%, and then he's going to pay 24% on that next 150,000, right? But his effective rate on all taxes is going to be around 18%. But I can lower that too. But that's
all right. So
I just want to make sure you're getting to that spot. Okay.
All right. And are we using Trump's tax reform, or are we going back to where there's no Trump's tax?
No, Trump's tax cut. This is this year in 2024. If I did this conversion,
all right.
What is your software you're using telling you the tax rate?
My software is because he still has his pension, right?
He's got his pension, 2 socials, and the RMD. All the same. That 139 is still there. Okay. And add 250,000 taxable income right on top through a Roth conversion. And if your software doesn't have it,
$57,000 Social Security, $48,000 pension, and we now have a $250,000 Roth conversion. Okay, I'm with you. Effectively, 18%. The cost of the conversion is 24%.
No, it's not 24%, because you're not converting all 250,000 at 24%. Right? You've got about 50 grand a room there before you would get out of the 22% tax.
My software is factoring in the Medicare Part IRMA and D premiums. So it's calculating that into it.
No, that's fair if you're calculating the IRMA into there. We calculate it on the side with our software, but that's fine. All right.
So the effective, when you add those in there, a $250,000 conversion is costing this individual about 24 to 25% for that conversion.
Yeah, so $47,000 or so. Yep. So gone. Now, then we do it again next year while we still have the same tax brackets available, right? And we might move that up a few $1,000s, but let's just leave it the same. But in year 3 in this plan, Adam, we're going to drop that conversion and never hit an IRMA penalty again, which, as you just enlightened us earlier, we can go up to about 210. There'll be inflation adjustment by about 220 grand, roughly, is the estimate that we could take their income up to in 2026. Are you with me there? Does that make sense, roughly?
Yep, I'm with you.
So, therefore, we would have room there. Now, by the way, his RMD is going to drop next year because we did a big conversion. We agree on that, right?
Yep.
So we can get more done next year. So we'd actually be able to push that up a little bit because there's going to be a smaller RMD. And then in 2026, again, the RMD is much smaller because now we've moved 500,000+ out of the account. We'd only have around 350, maybe a little growth on it, et cetera. So the RMD has been cut by more than half. All right. And then we're going to be able to fill up just to the Medicare penalty line, which would be about 220,000. So that'd be about 100 grand I can convert each year thereafter for the next 3 years. So in 5 years, 100% of his IRA, and we don't have to take it to 100%, by the way. I'm just telling you, it would only take 5 years in this example to get the conversions done. Can we agree on that?
Yes, I've got a whole conversation going on in my head, but I think
That's okay. Write it down, doodle it out. We can go through it. So we agree that in 5 years I can convert them. 2 years I'm going to blow IRMA up, right? We're going to create significant IRMA penalties, and the effective rate is going to be about 18% on all things, but the conversion, including IRMA, you're saying is 24%, which is fine. Now, once the IRMA stuff is over, we're just paying taxes to go. But all the money is in, and if your clients are anything like mine, I can't get them to spend the RMD anyway, right? I'll just put it in our joint account, right? Or fortunately pays taxes, et cetera. Now, I'll go back to the 6 taxes momentarily. I don't want to harp on it, but if you didn't have the pension income, right? If you just had Social Security, which is the majority of folks, right? You could effectively get to a 0% tax bracket. In fact, we get about 40% of our clients to 0 before their 75th birthday, and they stay there for the rest of their life. Now, the reason is Social Security is only taxed, for those of you listening, if you have other taxable income. And up to 85% of your Social Security can be taxed depending on how much taxable income you have. Well, we got a pension in this case that basically makes that happen, and the RMD certainly makes that happen. So what we want to do is realize that we're going to pay, when you take an RMD, you're going to make your Social Security pay tax, you're going to make your spouse Social Security pay tax. You're going to make your spouse eventually pay IRMA D, IRMA B, IRMA D, IRMA B. 6 taxes on one RMD distribution, right? If you just had Social Security, you only guaranteed or forced income. 6 taxes from one distribution in the future, and we can argue all day long what we think that will be. Now, on top of that, some states, here in Nebraska, it used to be that way. Social Security got state taxed at the state level. Husband and wife, there'd have been 2 more taxes. My clients could be paying 8 taxes for one distribution from one spouse's 403B, 401k, IRA, doesn't matter, which is why this is so important, Adam. We're talking about one tax today, paying one tax today to wipe out all these other taxes. Now, in this example, we are paying a couple other taxes for 2 years in a choice we make. And then we have a calculator that shows how we get that back on the back end. So let me kind of jump in to what that looks like. And then I want to bring up the biggest problem your clients are going to face that maybe you're not addressing. All right. So first off, if we were to take RMDs for the rest of their life, just so you know, now, again, we have to make assumptions, so forgive us there. So if my client started taking RMDs, say at age 75 in this example, and they took them out to age 90, based on that account value, they're going to pull out, Adam, $1.24 million in taxable distributions over their lifetime to pay for their retirement. That's the RMD calculation, right? That's adding it all up. Now, here's the problem. There will still, and again, we're assuming here, so we know that can be dangerous. So we're assuming that these accounts are growing. And you agreed with me earlier, 6% for the assumed rate of return for this argument or debate was reasonable. So if the account grew, and nothing grows linear, right, like that, but if it did grow 6% every year like clockwork, and every year you took out your required minimum distribution, nothing more, nothing less, when you get to age 90, so you're going to have a pile of dough left. Now, what if your client walked in earlier? What if they were 60 and you deferred it, which is what most financial advisors tell them to do? Hey, defer it. So I'm just going to use simple math here, and I go quick. You already figured that out. So if they were 60 and had 850 grand, which is literally the average age the client walks in my door is 61. 60 years old, had that 850 grand, and they were told by everybody else, including their CPA, to defer till they got to RMD age 75. If we did that, the 850, when they get to 75 at 6%, it's grown. It's actually a little over $2 million at that point. Now your first RMD at 75 is not $34,000. Your first RMD is over $82,000. And it's going to go up every single year. So now, if that's the case, if your client's 60, they walk in, and this is the example, are they going to pay IRMA a lot faster anyway with that other guaranteed income we talked about? You betcha. And they are actually going to pay over $200,000 by age 90 in that example in IRMA penalties alone. Where I'd rather control those IRMA penalties and pay 2 years of about 12 grand all in and wipe it out and be done with it. Now, of course, they're 60. I can get it done before we ever touch an IRMA penalty. Now, here's the good news. If they were 60, had 850, Adam, I changed the numbers, I know. Waited to 70, they took out 1.24 million in their retirement when they pass away, all right, at age 90. So I'm making a big assumption here. They pay, hey, you're in South Carolina, so I'm going to use one of my wife's favorite movies. It took place in South Carolina. Mary forgets a lot of her life, Adam, so Bob reads it back to her in this diary they have, and there's a assisted living facility somewhere in South Carolina. There's some pink swans on the lake. Yes, I'm talking about The Notebook, which I have to admit I've watched way more than I want to tell people, all right? But they pass away happily together in that bed at age 90. If that account grew at 6%, Adam, how much money's in the account? Well, some people might be surprised to know there's over $2 million still in that qualified IRA that now will pass on to the beneficiaries, most likely their children. And you know as well as I do, the stretch IRA is long gone. So now the kids have to empty this account out over 10 years. That's over $250,000 with growth, average, taxable income to those children, which we factor in, that they're going to be paying in taxes. Now you may say, my Karens don't give a hoot. I call BS on that. I believe your clients really do care what you give to their kids and if they can actually use it. We constantly preach stewardship. How do you want to be a good steward of this money? Do you really want the IRS to take half of it, which is what would happen in this example? They would get over half.
Put a pin in the legacy piece, because I do agree with you on that front. And who's the easiest person to tax? A dead person. And I'm sure you're aware of this, but maybe our listeners aren't. When they did the Secure Act and got rid of the 120-year stretch IRA and made it a 10-year stretch IRA, the Republicans wanted a 5-year provision. The Republicans, they wanted you to empty
because they
your
want to
IRA
balance they want to tell you they're not this tax and spend, which is what they are, all of them, right? Regardless of party.
In this scenario, there's a tremendous amount of validity to, for estate and legacy purposes. I agree. A heavy-handed, your taxes are on sale, especially considering what your kids will wind up paying when you kick the bucket. But go back, because this is where I'm like, hey, I don't get that math. IRMA aside, all this other stuff aside, the analogy you used, where the first analogy, where an individual has $850,000 in an IRA, they're of RMD age. We both agreed that with the pension, with the Social Security, with the RMD, under current tax code, they're at 8.5. Without Trump's tax reform, they're at 10.7, right? So that $250,000 conversion is going to cost them just shy of 50 grand in taxes.
Yep.
It'd have an effective tax rate of 24%, the effective conversion amount would be 24%.
How many years are they going to pay that 50 grand?
They're going to pay that 50 grand in your scenario 3 years.
2 years.
So you're going to do a 250,000.
24 and 25 only. And in 26, we reduce them down below IRMA penalties, and they would pay a little bit lower rate because we'd only be taking the conversion to about 220. So only about 50 to 60 grand would be at 24%, right? Half the conversion would be at 22. So the effective rate would be a little bit lower, and there'd be no IRMA penalties. Their effective rate would be in the 16s in those years, by the way. And then they're done, Adam. There's no more tax.
But get this. So here's where I'm like, this is where I wrestle with this, right? And under current circumstances, they're going to pay around $11,000 in taxes as it stands.
As it stands today, and in 2 years that'll be 14 and change.
And with a conversion, they're paying 50 grand in taxes. So it's a $40,000 bump up in their tax bill.
For long-term gain. Yeah. Now, again, we got to make some assumptions here. How long do you think your clients are going to live?
My argument there. What is the break-even point for that conversion? You're talking.
I love that question. Let's go. Let's talk break-even. What if? Let's just suppose, Adam, in some miracle world, they don't raise taxes in 2 years. They stay the same. So this is sometimes we get people like, well, I lost out on the opportunity of that 50 grand. If they assuming they don't have it in the checkbook, Adam, we'll withhold it for them, right? So assuming they don't even have it in the checkbook in a non-qualified account to pay said tax bill, we'll withhold it from the conversion. And people are like, well, now I'm losing out the growth of that 50,000, and maybe that's one of your arguments. So let's do that math.
And it's 100,000. It's 100,000 because we're doing this for 2 years.
So yeah, that's fine. But let me just use $100,000 as in an IRA. Let's say your client calls you up on a whim and they decided to actually follow your lead. You plan for them and they're actually going to dream a little and live a bucket list item. Maybe they're going to go buy an RV, all right, or a boat to go offshore fishing. You're down there by the water. I love fishing, right? So they're like, hey, we need to take $100,000 distribution out of our IRA because we're going to do X, Y, or Z, right? Whatever it is they're going to do. And they do this, at least in our office, occasionally. This is not an every year thing, but about once every 6 or 7 years, the client finally gets the muster up to do a bucket list item, world trip, whatever it might be. And they take a bigger distribution than originally planned. And they have the money. Let's face it, they weren't going to run out of money. So how would they be taxed on that in today's world? As you just pointed out, they're going to pay 24% basically, right? So if we had the client take a distribution of 24%, we're going to have to send 24 grand to the federal government, leaving the state out, which means your client has access. They really only have 76,000 of that 100 that's theirs. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, the argument you're making is the conversion causes them to be more tax nimble in the future. But yes.
Well, that's what my clients hire me to do, is lower their lifetime tax liability, which we do to the tune of over 200,000 for the average client pretty easily. So let me run this out a little further, right? So here's our options. We could take the distribution out, pay 24% and go spend the 76 today. We could do as I'm instructing a lot of clients. We could move it over to the Roth, and assuming, again, client doesn't have the wherewithal to pay the bill, we send 24 grand to the government. So over here, I'm going to put a net deposit of 76,000 in the account. So now I got 76 in the Roth versus 100 in your IRA. Are we in agreement there?
Yep.
Okay. So let's assume we just let it grow and assume you didn't even have to take an RMD in this example, so we didn't force any additional tax. And Curran Financial picks a great ETF. I happen to know one that does pretty well, y'all.
Hey.
And let's say that account doubles in value over, the next 15 years. That 100 grand turns into 200 grand. 200 grand doubles again, turns into 400 grand. And now we're 15 years or whatever time frame this is in the future. And you call up, hey, I want to buy that RV. Well, if inflation, you're going to need a bigger distribution. And let's say you tell me you want to take out all 400 grand. Now, assuming I could take it out in the same tax bracket, we know you'd go to a higher one, but assuming I could get you out of the same tax bracket, what will 24% be in less than 2 years? It'll be 28, right? So we know that future distribution, and you wouldn't get 400 grand out of 28, but assuming you could, if we had to pay 28%, that's 112,000 in taxes. So you get a net distribution to go spend in the future of $288,000. If I put your Roth money to work at the same investment, I picked that same investment, y'all, and it doubles twice. 176 is now 152. 152 doubles again. It's 304. And if you want to take it all out, how much do you get to keep? 100% of it. In my world, 304 is more than 288 all day, every day. Didn't increase performance one bit. Now, here's the argument. What if tax rates don't change? What if you didn't get 28%? What if you could take it out at 24 in the future? Guess what you'd get? 304. The exact same amount of money. By paying the same tax bill later as today, nothing changed. So I can't lose in this equation. What you will lose on is my client does not have to take a distribution over here. There are no required minimum distributions on the Roth. There are on this side. And Roths do not trigger Medicare penalties. It's not Medicare eligible income. So I never have to worry about IRMA on these distributions in the future, where I always have to be worried about them here. And by the way, you might be surprised, Adam, to find out just how bad IRMA is. Do you know what the historical inflation on those IRMA penalties is? It's not inflation. It's 7.4 and 6.8% respectively for B and D. Those penalties are scaling at more than twice the percent of inflation, according to Congressional Budget Office. So there's zero chance that my client has all the freedom in the world. Do they want the money? No. Do I keep growing it? Fine. And oh, by the way, if they never spend it, many clients don't, I have to arm wrestle them. This goes to their kids. How does that pass to their kids, Adam?
This right there.
Tax-free.
So but everything you just argued can be accomplished with a lighter-handed conversion. And the biggest thing that I have trouble with, and you're absolutely right on the legacy piece, a Roth IRA is the ultimate account to leave. So if legacy, if gifting is a key concern or a key goal of yours, heavy-handed Roth conversions make sense. There, I said it. But from an income planning perspective,
and it took a lot for you. I know.
From an income planning perspective, that same example, I keep going back to this initial example because I think it's a fair
Okay,
avatar.
and I would tell you you're wrong. You got to tell me what age do you want to knock your client off at? All right, because the math matters. The longer they live, right, the bigger the savings I get them from the conversion.
But what if I'm
and that's if tax rates don't change.
The longer they live, that gives me a longer time to do nibbling conversions, because I'm not against a conversion per se.
But you're also paying tax every year on Social Security growing, so you're paying more Social Security tax because of your distributions. I don't have that problem over here. If my client only has Social Security 1 and Social Security 2, and I get all their money converted, 10 years from now, if I need supplemental income on top of the guaranteed from the government, and I give them income out of this account, not only does it not get taxed, it does not trigger tax on Social Security. I'm saving all 6 of those taxes we talked about earlier. You've got to factor in all the taxes your clients are going to pay. Now, on top of that, some states, and I do not know the rules in South Carolina.
That plays well. Hey, you got to factor in all these taxes. But this person just took a $120,000 tax bill when they were accustomed to paying $10,000 a year. So
listen, Adam, you've got a very successful business there in Curran Financial, right? So you invested your hard-earned capital and your company has grown. You started your company here and the value of your company's grown. And I have some idea how big it is because you are an awesome guy. You and I were blessed to get inducted into a Hall of Fame in our industry at the exact same time. So that was a cool experience we shared. But the value of our businesses keeps growing. But let me ask you a question. If your business is there and then I walk up, Adam, now that your business has attained this size, I tell you what, I believe I deserve to get this much. This share of the business is what I'd like. But I don't want you to pay me anything now. You keep growing your business, Adam, and I'm going to want a bigger share. And by the way, I've invested nothing into your business. But you know what? The minute you sell it and access the capital you've worked so hard to acquire for your family, I want a bigger piece. Is that a fair deal? I say no. But that's your IRA. You have a guaranteed partner in that 401k, IRA, 403b, and that slice, as the account grows, the slice you have to give to your silent partner, the IRS, continues to grow. Why wouldn't you want to buy your partner out now before the value of your company grows?
I like
or the
that.
Value of your IRA grows?
I like that analogy, right? Because you are buying them off now. Right?
It's exactly right. So you're right. I'm making you pay the bill. And that's the thing is, listen, we don't go offshore for our tax planning. I have over 120 tax strategies. Not one of them do I need to go to Cook Islands or Cayman Islands to create some crazy tax strategy. I'm simply showing you how the math works, how the IRS code works. 1,700 different tax incentives lie in our tax code today between all 50 states and the federal tax code that are written, Adam, to help you and your clients pay lower taxes. Now, we haven't even got to the argument of we have additional strategies to help lessen the burden of all these Roth conversions, but we're going deep here. I want to go back and talk about something that's really important, and it may be important to your listeners here. So let me go back and find Bob and Mary here.
I'm still not a believer, though, to be honest. I just
that's okay.
The initial analogy that you have called up right there. You know, I have it all in my software again.
Well, let me demonstrate something that might make you a believer right here, right now.
Like a $50,000 conversion. If that individual does a $50,000 instead of a $250,000, you know, their effective tax rate goes to 8.5 to 12. That's an $11,000 bump up in taxes rather than a $70,000 bump up in tax. I think we're maybe saying the same thing a couple different ways. I think your analogy is
let me just talk about what's really going to be affecting your clients and what they're going to care about. Now, listen, I got Bob and Mary here, and we'll just leave the income the same, pension, Social Security, and the RMD. What if something happens to Bob or Mary, Adam? All right. Now, just to be polite here, guys, we're going to knock Bob off because we die first. And some people always ask, hey, why do guys die? It's about 5.5 years on average earlier. Why do guys die first? Well, I've been married 32 years, and I always tell them it's because we want to. I'm just kidding. I love my wife. All right. So, but let's just say that Bob unfortunately just passed away last Christmas. This was their income, right? Last year. And Bob passed away at the holidays. What income in this scenario does Mary lose? Right? Mary's going to lose the smaller Social Security. We can agree on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the pension was a survivor pension. She keeps that. She gets the bigger Social Security, and his IRA is now her IRA, right? RMD still applies. So if I were to then just say, okay, now I've got Mary here. She's got Social Security of $38,000. Mary has that pension of $48,000. All right. And now she has to take the RMD. His account's her account. So she still has to take his RMD. Let's just call it $35,000. Simple round numbers here. How much income does Mary have? Right? She's got a total of just about 120 grand there or so, right? So 121 roughly.
Yeah, I got it.
In gross income.
121 with an effective tax rate of 15%. Her tax is $17,000 and a bump on.
Thank you. Her tax bill is $17,673. And in 2026, guess what that tax bill jumps to? $20,699. She's got less income, Adam, and her tax bill is almost double. So you can call the effective rate all you want. She is now paying $9 grand more in taxes than her Bob and Mary paid last year by herself in 2 years. And oh, by the way, guess what Mary is now filing as? Because she's a single filer. She's over the threshold for IRMA. So now she's going to bring those penalties into play year one.
Yep. So that's all very valid, right? Someone kicks the bucket, you get pushed into the single grid instead of the joint grid. The single grid is far more malicious, and those numbers are all spot on. You know, going back to the avatar client, though.
Okay, let's do that.
We don't die like Romeo and Juliet, but
hang on now. Let me run some numbers here.
The less that math is attractive. So if Bob lives to 85 and Mary dies at 87.
Well, we're going to stick with 90 because that's the numbers we started with. 60-year-old walks in your door, typical client, 850 grand in the IRA, waits to 75, take that RMD. That RMD, it's going to be a $2 million account by then if it grew at 6%, right?
No
RMD is now 82 grand. 82,000 in forced distribution out, and they'll take out $1,243,000 in RMDs. And age 90, there's going to be a little over $2,071,056 left for the kids. The kids' net inheritance after that is 1,284, $1,284,000 in best case scenario tax planning for the kids. It's the best they can do. Okay, whether you take it lump sum or take it over 10 years, assuming the kid would be at least in the 28% tax bracket, which they would be with that distribution at a bare minimum. Best the kids can net is 1.24. I can do conversions from a 60-year-old, and by the way, no IRMAs here if they're 60 in this example, because I get all the conversions done prior, because 63 is the year we have to focus on IRMA. If I do that conversion of 250 grand,
they get in healthcare. A lot of people who work with us under 65 are gaming Obamacare out. So
you should look into MediShare. I've been on it 15 years. I don't have health insurance. I have all my stuff covered.
Yeah, we use Liberty Health Share. I had 4 kids on it, so we could do a whole show on that.
Yeah, we could. All right, so now 250,000 gets converted. I'm going to send the tax bill, which, by the way, with their income, it was 57,000 total tax liability. All right, I'm going to deposit 192 grand net into my Roth in year one. In year two, I'm going to roughly do the same thing. And years 3, 4, and 5, I'm going to get the rest of the money in there, growing it at 6%. If they want to take the same income from 75 to 90, that same tax equivalent income, so I give them what's tax equivalent, so it's less, but it's tax equivalent to the 1,243 they took an income over their retirement, every year gets the same exact net dollar amount they would have received. When they pass away, the kids over here will inherit 2,586. 100% tax-free. My clients enjoyed all this income tax-free in their retirement because they prepaid the bill, as we talked about. They bought out the shareholder in their company in the next 5 years.
All right, so
the only way I lose in my client's lifetime, Adam, is if both spouses pass away before I get done the conversion process and they realize the gain. But that is unlikely to happen. And even if it does, the kids benefit and the net tax savings between the clients and their children far outweighs the pain that they go through up front.
Well, here would be my very, very simplistic, less verbose response. strategic distributions from 60 to 70 or 72, right? You should be taking small distributions, let your income flow to your bank account. You want to do some level of distribution / conversion, but my argument is against this heavy-handed conversion, this six-figure conversion. And then if you are worried about the 10-year rule, which might be the 5-year rule, which might be the eat the rich rule, what we're telling our people to do is throw your grandkids up on the contingent beneficiary line. So you're passing that money to more entities. I know that's not ideal for individuals that don't have lots of grandkids. I get the conversion as a legacy piece. I'd almost want to run life insurance illustrations like, hey, how about instead of paying $150,000 in federal income tax, we, pay $10,000 a year into a life policy, because that's accomplishing the same thing to a certain degree if you're really hell-bent on leaving a tax-free legacy. And I'm not even a life insurance guy. I can't believe I just said that out loud.
Which, by the way, is an option after you start doing the conversion. Sometimes our clients will realize that we can lever it one step further. So if we were converting 80 grand a year, whatever the number was in the plan, every plan is different. Today I focused on a heavy-handed one because that's what you and I want to talk about.
The Roth conversion as a legacy piece makes sense. The Roth conversion as a survivorship piece, if husband or wife kicks the bucket long before the surviving spouse, that makes sense. But if we're talking about
let's cover the other option then. So you agree for legacy. You agree if, God forbid, we lose a spouse 5 to 8 years in.
I don't agree with the heavy-handedness of it all. Even in those
instances, let me show you some data.
A little bit more.
All right, can you see Retire Smart on the screen right now? Are you seeing the Retire Smart?
Yeah, I can see your spread. I can see it. Yep.
Here's a case where I have Bob is 61, and if you go to 2 boxes down, you'll see he's got a little over 900 grand in that qualified bucket. You with me there?
I'm with you.
All right. So RMDs for Bob will start at 75. That's what the software is, and we're assuming a 6% rate of return.
What did they change the RMD age again? Oh yeah, they did. I
guess they did.
You say 75. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm so crusty. I thought it was 70 and a half.
Yeah. Anybody born 1960 or later is going to be 75. So here's his IRA, assuming 6% growth, no RMDs taken. If we let that cook, you can see in this example, we started with 900,000. We end up with 2,117,000 here, and the RMD is about 85 grand. Can we agree on that?
I agree on it, but you're talking about just totally letting it cook.
Yep, I am. So, yes, we can argue this all day. Let me run my numbers, and then you can come back and do your verbose picking on it. So the tax rate then would be 28%, not 24%, right?
Yep.
And if we scroll down, if we go to their lifetime, and I ran this to age 90, again, we can argue that all day long. If you look at the bottom of the screen there, they would have taken $2 million in distributions in this example by age 90, so that's 2053. They would have paid $576,000 in federal taxes. Does that make sense? And I left it 28% the entire way. I never changed it, never raised it.
Okay.
You with me there?
Yeah.
All right. Now, go to the next page. Now, here's heavy-handed conversions for 2 years in a row. Now, in this example, this is a different case, but this client had $925,000. They were charitably inclined. So in year one, we added a donor-advised fund. They were donating about 10 grand a year, we found anyway, to charity. So we did 5 years up front. That's the $50,000 charitable distribution you see there on line 1. All right. Yep. But I converted $315,000 there and kept them at 24% because of that donor-advised fund. I paid $63,000 in taxes, which you can see right there on the conversion. I deposited $251 grand in the Roth, and again, assumed it grew at 6%. The next year, I dropped it down to $280,000 because I want to keep him in that 24% bracket. And then every year thereafter, when he's 63, I dropped my conversions down to 70 grand, so I would never go past 25%, right, which is 22 today where they are. And I ran that out, and it took me 10 years, and I ran his IRA out of money. The last conversion only needed to be $56,000. So I paid 25% on each of those conversions, 17 grand, got it done, right? Now, scroll to the bottom. What did my client pay in lifetime taxes? It's $267,000 there on those IRA dollars, not $576. So now go up to the next page. All right. This is, by the way, showing you the value of the IRA depleting every year. And because we started early enough, we don't have an RMD ever. Now click to the next page. So now here's the difference. Here's the real where the money hits the road. On the left, my client was due to pay $576,000 in lifetime taxes on RMDs if tax rates never go up more than the current law says. The kids are required, and I factor this in for every client, and maybe you don't, but the kids are going to have to pay $747,000 to inherit what was left. Total taxes paid between my client and their kids on their qualified assets alone, $1,324,000. The kids net $1.38 million. If we pay the $267,000 in this example over the next 10 years, that's all that gets paid on that account. The kids pay nothing to inherit those dollars. The kids now again, there's a big assumption right here, so please forgive me. If my clients, and this is the case for a lot of our clients, about a third of them never touch their Roth dollars ever. They just have enough income. The kids could inherit $5.2 million on the same 6% compounding because they never took a distribution. That is a difference of over $3.5 million to the estate that the children are picking up tax-free. Now, in the example I did on the whiteboard earlier, I actually gave you the income out and it cut that number in half. And this would be about $2.7 million the kids would get, even if the clients took out the same income they would have netted from the RMD. I win no matter what. And this one, I'm winning by over almost $300,000 in my client's lifetime. Now, again, if they die by 85, that number's down closer to about $190,000 in savings. If they lived to 95, that number's over $500,000 in savings, right? But we run everybody to 90. And if one spouse makes it to that age, my numbers are absolutely accurate. And again, we have to make some assumptions.
No, your software is beautiful, by the way. So the big assumptions that are getting made in here, though, which we need to kind of blast out, and you've said it twice, you're being very, very, very clairvoyant here, is one, we're letting the money in the IRA cook from 60 to 75, meaning that person's not taking a nickel out of their IRA because you said they are perfectly happy living off the pension, the Social Security.
Yeah,
they're not going to spend the money.
We deal with, correct.
So if you get someone, and I agree with you, we run into those people a lot too, no matter how much I chip at them. And I'm like, guys, spend your darn money or give it away. Let that income rain to your bank account and live abundantly. But some people you just can't crack. They're too hard of eggs. So I'm with you on that. So if this person is kind of and I don't even want to call them a spendthrift because they're living off of $130,000 with those pensions and Social Securities. I mean, everything you just laid out adds up. If it's a hey, I want to leave a massive legacy, convert. I love the donor advised fund strategy. But if they're taking money out proactively or systematically or to live off of because you're trying to jack up their income, the mathematics of that long drawn out illustration changed dramatically. The illustration you laid out is powerful as all can be. But I think it changes if you're taking systematic distributions, strategic distributions, or if you're doing light conversions along the way, not these big, heavy-handed conversions.
We can run in any scenario you want. We won't have time to do that, but I'll actually run this scenario, spend the IRA. We can do that. We can reinvest the IRA, by the way, and show you, or the RMD. So we can take the RMD out, reinvest it and show you that your kids still do more and you do better. We have all these options. Now, what I added there was the other thing is we added a donor advised fund, that very last example, really quickly. So I just want to make sure for who's listening, if anybody's still listening, that's one of my favorite strategies, DAF. That's because David's an awesome financial planner. All right. So donor advised fund, I personally use this strategy every year.
There's a myriad of ways. I've heard it before. I've heard the joke before, so it lost a little of its moxie. But if it was the first time you gave it to me, I would be in stitches.
So the donor advised fund is a very underutilized tool when people are actually giving away. Now, we won't have time today, but there's actually 3 different unique ways to use a donor advised fund to help your clients. And then QCDs we didn't take in effect. If the client's donating, I wouldn't even have to take that conversion all the way down because I would have got it down to where their $10,000 a year would have, left them with $150,000 in their IRA and then made their charitable gifts from the IRA once they were over 70 and a half years old. So there's a lot of factors that we can't go into, and we're hypothesizing these certain situations. But I will tell you, Adam, I've been doing this a long time. I've been as you know, I've been studying the tax code heavily for over 20 years. And I have in my career done, I don't know, probably 7,000 Roth conversions, because we do a ton every year. We probably do over 1,000 this year alone because our firm is growing so fast. And we do the math. And like I said, only 4% of our clients does it not make sense. And we actually run not just the scenarios I ran with you here. We ran, what if you wanted to spend it down? And we absolutely would help you spend your IRA dollars down now, because what we didn't talk about, and again, I think it's fair game not to really talk about, is the rhetoric, oh, tax rates are going to go back to where they were in the 1970s, right? None of my planning takes that into effect, but do I think it's a reality? Yeah, I will tell you right now from our modeling, from the Wharton School of Finance, from Stanford University, tax rates have to go up 40% across the board by 2030. That's a fact. CBO listed that. And then you further want to look at, and I don't have the books with me, but what is currently in committee right now in the House of ways to increase revenue for the federal government. There's two booklets, small revenue grabs and large revenue grabs. They want to take your Medicare Part B right now, which you pay $174, they want to make you pay a third of it. It's $1,000 a month, just so you know what Medicare costs. You're paying about 18% right now. So when you go on things like Medicare Advantage plans, again, we can have a whole discussion on that, you got to realize the carrier is getting paid about $1,000 a month from the federal government to manage your health care. So if you stick on Medicare, they know those costs are there, and they only make you pay a small percentage of Medicare. They want you to pay a full third of it. So everybody in the country is most likely to be paying $350 or more to access Medicare. And by the way, you can't say no to Medicare if you want your Social Security. You don't get to opt out. It's mandatory. So tax planning like this can save not only the taxes we're talking about today, but can save potential future taxation on accounts. And by the way, there is legislative proposed right now. It's actually in Biden's budget. You can go online and read it for next year to cap these heavy-handed Roth conversions. They want to phase it out. And just so you know, Roth accounts have been around longer than I've been in the business. I got a lot of gray hair. They were introduced in 1997, Adam, but 2010 was the magic year. We uncapped it. You used to be able to only contribute or convert to the income threshold, right? Which is the 208 or whatever is for a married couple today. That is going to be coming back most likely. It's in the proposal. So you may not get the chance to do these heavy-handed conversions in the future. If you have a client, and we have several, and we talked about one earlier, $4 or $5 million IRAs, 37% is nothing. That is a discount. You may want to get it done in two swoops this year and next year, and then you can add other strategies like charitable remainder trusts. I have several other ones we would add to soften the blow of those heavy-handed conversions, but you really owe it to your clients with higher balances to start thinking about this if they're not going to spend the money. And so whether you need the money, don't need the money, my math shows that 96% of the time, conversions make sense. Now, the dollar amount of conversion would certainly differ. Obviously, we're having to whiteboard out and just kind of riff these examples on the fly, but you can send me any example you want. I will run it through my software and send it back to you after, later, and we can go through it. And you can give me any scenario you want, and I'll be happy to do it.
Your software and the software I use, everything was off by like $100. It was pretty close when we first started rifting. And look, yep. I've got nothing but respect for you. You haven't fully convinced me because I just feel like, but I know it's not shtick. I know you believe in your heart of hearts, and I know your clients are in good hands with your philosophy. I just still continue. I continue to look at the break even. People are being subjected to massive amounts of immediate taxation for the potential avoidance of a tax boogeyman. Now, that potential avoidance becomes a real avoidance if a spouse dies significantly premature to the other spouse. So that starts to become real for me. And there's a real tax situation that occurs if the person kicks the bucket and they've got a gob of money in their IRA for their heirs. But I just talked about two ways to avoid that. Systematic strategic drawdowns, distributions,
which you're paying tax on,
light-handed Roth conversions, and bumping grandchildren up to contingent beneficiary lines. I feel like that's a more measured, more tempered, more prudent way to avoid.
You send me the case that you think that makes sense for. You give me the income, whatever they've got. I will run not only will I run it in my software and my tax software, I'll run it in 4 softwares and send you back a plan like we would design. And we can do a 10-minute follow-up Zoom, if you'd like, to this conversation. Now, I will tell you, you talk about, this isn't my shtick, this isn't marketing. Yeah. I have sent $75 million to the taxing authorities on behalf of my clients when I do these conversions in the last 6 years alone. That is money that, as you and I both are, we're fee-based, fiduciary-based advisors. We get paid on the asset pile we manage. I've sent that money away. I'm not billing on those funds anymore. Yet that's how I make my living. That's how strong and how passionate I am about my math working out for my client in the end. And so you really need to take that into account as well, right? Because if somebody's telling you yes or no, the conversion doesn't make sense, that's fine. Prove it to me. If I'm the client, I want you to show me your math, show me you worked it out both ways versus just, well, I don't think it'll work out. I want you to show me it doesn't work out. And like I said, it's only 4% of the people that have walked in my door that it makes sense not to do conversions.
Well, that's why you're on the podcast, man. You're the guy who does these conversions so prolifically. And I know you got a jet. I got a jet here in a minute. I think we do need to have a follow-up where your software.
Send me a case. So let's do this. I'll let you put the parameters together. You tell me the age of the client. You send me your client avatar. Let me run it through our system. And then we'll get on a Zoom and I'll literally present it to you almost like I would a client of what we came up with. And then you can either agree to be convinced for 3 or the 4 strategies why and still hang on to your one or not. So to conclude today's, because I do got to run, you agree for smaller income levels, conversions make sense. Typically the 12% tax bracket, 10 or 12, you're probably thinking that makes sense.
That's a no-brainer.
You agree if you think a spouse is going to have health issues, that makes sense because the survivor's income and Medicare penalty. And you agree if legacy planning is really important to you.
I still think that there's a more measured way to do it.
That's all right. I'm happy to look how you would present the case and I'd present the case and go for it from there. But I think this is a healthy, good discussion to have because, as you know, I've trained hundreds of advisors, and we've taken our time, 14 years in development of the software that we've created to these conversions, and we very simply want to be able to show people, if you will, on a one-pager, hey, here's the value of doing this, and here's the other side of it. So because I could pull up the Medicare software too. Yep.
The hundreds of advisors would like nothing more than for you to dunk on me a million different ways about why a Roth conversion is God's gift to financial
So Adam
planning.
and I are in a private group of entrepreneurs that own similar businesses across the country. We help give each other. And Adam likes to be the salmon that goes against the current, let's say, sometimes on certain posts in there.
You're spot on. I mean, my perspective, and there was one other person amongst like 30 of them that were like, yeah, dude, I'm with you. Because I do think that there is a level of, and I don't think you're doing this, but I do think that within the advisor communities, there's the guy who does the dinner presentation and just tells everyone to convert to a Roth because it sounds sexy. And it's like, dude, no, that doesn't make sense. Look at the mathematics. But I'm with you.
And for anyone listening to this podcast, let's put some disclosure out here. Do not run out and do this on your own, because we've had people do that, and we do. We have workshops and classroom events, and we explain people to do it, and then they blow up their tax bill because they didn't think everything through. You may need to understand your last year of employment, depending on your employer, you may have a very large lump sum for PTO, unpaid, things like that. Hospitals around here, sometimes people get a year's salary paid out. You've got to factor all these things into the equation. What if you're going to have a big capital gain that year? And again, that's why we have over 120 tax strategies to help mitigate or reduce these variances in the plan.
Pisses me off about Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey's like, do you got the cash to pay it? Convert it immediately. Like, it's just kind of real blanketed type advice. But
he's the one telling people to take a 12% distribution or whatever it was. Crazy math. Look, David's right. Dave Ramsey's right. Get yourself out of debt. But the rest of it, no, it's not so much. And I always ask people, by the way, hey, how many licenses do you think Dave Ramsey holds? Which ones has he passed? Oh, that's weird.
Well, he's got his own problems with his next generation of radio talent. If you've listened to his show recently, it's not the same. But anyways, Mr. Brooks, I appreciate you doing this with us. I am going to have to come back to the well. But, every time you come onto my podcast, you take a bunch of clients away from me. So, what gives
we'll
there?
open up in South Carolina soon.
Mr. Brooks, thanks for doing this with me. And
my pleasure, brother.
I'm still not a believer. I'm going to continue to be the salmon that swims upstream. But maybe we'll do it again with a couple real case scenarios.
Yep. Send me the case where it doesn't make sense in your mind, and let's do it again.
All right. Thanks for doing this, man.
All right. No problem.